Poor Virginia guy saves drowning California girl. Unexpectedly, she is a millionaire daughter who changes his life forever. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the waves as they rolled lazily onto the shore. The scent of salt and sunscreen filled the warm summer air, blending with the distant laughter of tourists enjoying the last hours of daylight. Jack wiped the sweat from his brow as he stacked the last of the rental paddles in the wooden storage shed near the dock. It had been a long day, and his arms ached from hauling kayaks and paddleboards for customers. He was ready to call it a night, maybe grab a cold drink and sit by the water for a while. Then, a scream tore through the air. Someone's drowning. Call for help. Jack's head snapped up. A small crowd had gathered at the shoreline, pointing frantically toward the ocean. His eyes followed their gestures, and his stomach clenched. A girl. She was struggling against the waves, arms flailing, her dark hair slick against her face as the tide dragged her farther from shore. Jack didn't think. He ran. His feet pounded against the wet sand as he tore off his shirt and dove into the surf. The water was colder than he expected, but he barely noticed. Years of swimming in these waters had trained his body to move against the pull of the current. He pushed forward, each stroke bringing him closer. The girl went under. Jack's heart kicked against his ribs. "Hold on," he shouted, his voice barely carrying over the crashing waves. She resurfaced, coughing, gasping for air, eyes wide with panic. "Take my hand." Jack reached for her, but she was too disoriented to respond. Another wave crashed over them, pulling her under again. Jack lunged, wrapping an arm around her waist. She struggled, her instinct to fight making it harder for him to keep them both afloat. "Stop fighting me," he ordered, his voice firm but calm. "I've got you." Her body tensed, then went still, either from exhaustion or trust. Jack wasn't sure. He kicked hard, propelling them toward shore. The tide was strong, pushing back against him, but he had done this before. He focused on the rhythm of his strokes, the weight of her in his arms, the distant sound of voices shouting from the beach. After what felt like an eternity, his feet found the ocean floor. He staggered toward the shallows, his grip tightening as her body sagged against his. By the time they reached the sand, she was barely conscious, her lips tinged blue. Jack lowered her onto the shore, his pulse hammering. "She's not breathing." Someone yelled. Jack dropped to his knees. His training kicked in. Tilting her head back, he pressed his hands against her chest and started compressions. "Come on," he muttered under his breath. "Breathe." A second. Then another. Nothing. Jack pinched her nose, sealed his lips over hers, and breathed air into her lungs. One breath. Two. Then, she coughed violently, water spilling from her mouth as her body jerked. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Jack exhaled, relief washing over him as her eyes fluttered open. For a moment she just lay there, dazed, her chest rising and falling unevenly. Then her gaze met his. Jack had saved a lot of people from the ocean before. Tourists who underestimated the current, children who drifted too far. But something about this moment felt different. Her dark eyes were filled with something he couldn't quite place. Gratitude, shock, something deeper. "You're okay," he assured her, his voice softer now. "Just breathe." She did, taking in shaky gulps of air. Jack sat back, running a hand through his wet hair. Around them, people began to murmur, some clapping, others still staring in stunned silence. Someone must have called emergency services because sirens were approaching in the distance. The girl blinked, still trying to focus. "You saved me." Jack let out a small, breathless chuckle. "Yeah, well, you weren't making it easy." A weak smile tugged at her lips, but before she could respond, paramedics pushed through the crowd. Jack stepped back, letting them take over. His body was exhausted, his muscles aching, but his mind was still replaying the way she had looked at him. As they lifted her onto the stretcher, she turned her head toward him, her expression unreadable. Jack didn't know it yet, but saving this girl would change his life forever. The fluorescent lights of the small coastal clinic buzzed softly, casting a sterile glow over the white walls. The rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor filled the quiet room, accompanied only by the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore outside. Jack sat on a plastic chair near the hospital bed, his arms crossed, his wet clothes still clinging to his skin. He had been here for hours, waiting. He could have left after handing her over to the paramedics, but for some reason he stayed. The girl stirred, letting out a soft groan as her fingers twitched against the crisp hospital sheets. Slowly, her dark lashes fluttered open, revealing a pair of deep brown eyes that blinked in confusion. Jack leaned forward. "Hey, take it easy." She turned her head toward him, her gaze unfocused at first. Then recognition flickered in her eyes. "You?" she whispered, her voice raspy. Jack let out a small chuckle. "Yeah, me." Her brows furrowed as she took in her surroundings, her fingers instinctively reaching for the IV line in her arm. "Where am I?" "The local clinic," Jack replied. "You almost drowned. But you're okay now." She exhaled, closing her eyes briefly. "Right, the ocean." I remember her voice trailed off before she looked at him again. "You saved me." Jack shrugged. "Guess I was in the right place at the right time." She studied him for a long moment, as if trying to piece things together. Then she managed to push herself up slightly, wincing at the effort. "What's your name?" she asked. "Jack Carter." "I'm Olivia. Olivia Parker." Jack nodded, the name not meaning much to him. "Nice to meet you, Olivia Parker. Under slightly less dramatic circumstances, I hope." A small, breathless laugh escaped her. "Yeah, I guess I owe you one, huh?" Jack shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. Just glad you're okay." But Olivia wasn't convinced. She glanced down at her hands, her nails perfectly manicured despite the ordeal she had just been through. Then, her gaze shifted back to him, his damp, sand-covered clothes, his roughened hands, the calluses lining his fingers. She tilted her head. "You work here? At the beach?" Jack nodded. "Yeah, I help out at the boat rental shop, do some odd jobs around town." Something flickered in her expression, curiosity, maybe even something like disbelief. "So you live here? In this town?" Jack smirked slightly. "All my life." The contrast between them couldn't have been clearer. Even though she was lying in a hospital bed, her presence radiated something effortlessly refined, like she had been born into a different world entirely. And she had. Olivia hesitated before speaking again. "I'm from Los Angeles." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, what brings you all the way to Virginia?" She sighed. "Family vacation. My dad insisted on taking a break from the city, or whatever that means. We have a house near the beach for the summer." Jack nodded, though the words "we have a house for the summer" sounded like a completely foreign concept to him. She licked her lips, then added, "My dad, he's Parker. William Parker. Parker Enterprises." Jack blinked, the name now clicking into place. Even though he didn't pay much attention to the business world, he had heard of Parker Enterprises, a real estate empire worth billions, responsible for some of the most expensive developments in the country. So, she was that Olivia Parker. Jack didn't say anything, but something about his silence made Olivia shift uncomfortably. "I just thought you should know," she muttered. "Since you saved my life and all." Jack leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Doesn't change anything." She looked at him, surprised. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "I mean, whether you're rich or not, you were still drowning." She blinked, taken aback. "That's not usually how people react when they find out who I am." Jack smirked. "Let me guess. Most people either treat you like royalty or try to use you for something." Olivia sighed, leaning her head back against the pillow. "You have no idea." Jack exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Well, sorry to disappoint, but I don't need anything from you. Saving you wasn't some kind of business deal." Olivia studied him for a long moment, as if trying to figure him out. Then, to his surprise, she smiled, a real, genuine smile. "That's refreshing," she admitted. Jack chuckled. "Glad I could be of service." A moment of silence passed between them, a strange, unspoken understanding settling in. Olivia cleared her throat, shifting slightly. "Look, I know you said I don't owe you anything, but—" She hesitated before continuing. "I'd really like to repay you somehow." Jack shook his head. "Like I said, you don't have to." "But I want to," Olivia pressed. "Money, a favor, anything. Just name it." Jack met her gaze, unwavering. "I didn't save you for a reward, Olivia." She swallowed, his words catching her off guard. She had spent her whole life surrounded by people who either feared her father or wanted something from him. Jack was the first person she had met in a long time who didn't seem to care at all. And for the first time, Olivia Parker didn't feel like a millionaire's daughter. She just felt like a girl who had been saved by a boy from a world completely different from her own. The sun was high in the sky, casting a golden shimmer over the waves as they lapped gently against the wooden docks. The scent of salt and fresh sea breeze filled the air, mingling with the occasional calls of seagulls overhead. Jack stood barefoot on the edge of a small fishing boat, expertly tying a knot on the rope securing it to the dock. His hands moved with practiced ease, muscles flexing under the sun as he worked. "Okay, sailor?" Olivia's voice rang from behind him. "What's next?" Jack turned, squinting against the sunlight. She stood there in a pair of denim shorts and a simple white tank top, looking completely out of place, yet somehow perfectly at home. He smirked. "You sure you're up for this?" Olivia crossed her arms, arching a brow. "I survived almost drowning. I think I can handle a boat ride." Jack chuckled, shaking his head. "All right, princess, let's see what you've got." She rolled her eyes at the nickname but stepped forward eagerly as Jack helped her into the boat. With a push, they were off, gliding over the water. The first few minutes were quiet, Olivia simply taking in the view. The coastline stretched endlessly in both directions, untouched and wild, nothing like the private, overly manicured beaches she was used to in California. "This is incredible," she murmured. Jack, adjusting the sail, glanced at her. "You've never been on a boat before." "Not like this." She hugged her knees to her chest, her voice softer now. "Everything in my world is controlled, structured. This is," she trailed off, struggling to find the words. "Free?" Jack offered. She turned to him, her brown eyes reflecting the sunlight. "Yeah, free." They spent the afternoon on the water, Jack showing her how to cast a fishing line, how to steer the boat, how to read the wind. Olivia, despite her initial complaints about the smell of fish and the slimy texture of bait, threw herself into it, laughing whenever she did something wrong, cheering when she finally got it right. At some point, they anchored near a quiet inlet, the water calm and inviting. Jack stood at the edge of the boat, hands on his hips. "All right, lesson 2, swimming." Olivia scoffed. "I think I've had enough of the ocean trying to kill me for one trip." Jack smirked. "It's different when you're in control. Come on." She hesitated, biting her lip. Then, before she could talk herself out of it, she pulled off her tank top, revealing the bikini she had worn underneath, and dove in. The water was cool against her sun-kissed skin, a refreshing contrast to the warmth of the day. When she surfaced, she found Jack already in the water beside her. "Told you," he said, pushing his wet hair back. "Not so bad." She smiled, floating on her back. "You were right." For a while, they simply drifted, the waves rocking them gently. It was the first time Olivia had felt truly weightless, not just in the water, but in her life. No expectations, no responsibilities, just this moment. Jack watched her, admiring the way the sunlight danced off her skin, the way her laughter came so easily now compared to when they first met. He had never met anyone like her. Someone who belonged to a world so far from his, yet seemed to fit here in his world so effortlessly. And that terrified him, because the more time they spent together, the more he felt himself wanting something he knew he could never have. That night, after docking the boat, they walked along the beach, their feet sinking into the cool sand. "I get why you love it here," Olivia said, wrapping her arms around herself as a breeze rolled in. Jack glanced at her. "Yeah?" She nodded. "It's simple, real. No pretense, no expectations, just life." Jack swallowed hard. "And what about your life? Back in California?" She exhaled. "It doesn't feel like mine. Not really." They stopped walking. Olivia turned to him, and for the first time there was a vulnerability in her expression that made Jack's chest tighten. "You ever feel like you're living a life that was chosen for you?" she asked. Jack hesitated before nodding. "Yeah." They stood there, the silence stretching between them, filled with something unspoken. The waves crashed gently against the shore, the moon casting a soft glow over everything. Jack knew he should step back, keep his distance. She wasn't staying. She belonged to a different world. But then, Olivia reached for his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. And just like that, Jack knew he was in trouble. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of salt and the faint hint of sunscreen from early beachgoers. The sun had just begun its ascent over the horizon, casting long shadows over the wooden dock where Jack stood, adjusting the ropes on one of the boats. He had barely slept the night before. His mind kept replaying the way Olivia had held his hand as they walked along the shore, the way she had looked at him under the moonlight, like she had found something she hadn't even known she was searching for. Jack had spent his whole life believing that people like her, people from money, from privilege, didn't stay in places like this. And yet, Olivia had lingered. Maybe, just maybe, she had felt it too. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of hurried footsteps behind him. "Jack!" He turned. Turd. Olivia stood there, barefoot on the dock, her hair tousled from the wind, eyes filled with something he couldn't quite place. But before he could say anything, she spoke. "I have to go." Jack's stomach twisted, but he kept his expression neutral. "When?" "Now." "Oh." Jack exhaled, nodding once, his fingers tightening around the rope in his hands. "Well," he said after a moment, forcing a small, detached smile, "it was nice knowing you. Have a safe trip." Olivia's brow furrowed. "That's it?" Jack shrugged. "What else should I say?" She stared at him, searching his face for something, anything, that would tell her what he was really thinking. But Jack wouldn't let her see. Because the truth was, it hurt, more than he wanted to admit. Olivia's hands clenched at her sides. "Jack," she hesitated, like she wanted to say something more. "Tell me to stay," a small voice whispered in the back of her mind. But Jack just nodded toward the path leading back to town. "Your car's waiting," he said quietly. She swallowed hard. "Right." For a long moment, they just stood there, neither of them moving. Then, finally, Olivia turned and walked away. Jack watched her go, every step feeling like a punch to the gut. And when she disappeared from sight, he let out a slow breath, staring at the empty horizon, telling himself that this was how it was always meant to end. But Olivia wasn't so sure. As the car pulled away from the dock, taking her farther and farther from the little town that had become more than just a summer escape, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was leaving something behind. Something real. Oh, something she wasn't ready to let go of. The days after Olivia left felt eerily quiet. Jack went back to his routine, early mornings at the docks, long hours under the sun, hauling kayaks and fixing boats. But something about it felt different now. Empty. He hadn't expected her to stay. He wasn't foolish enough to believe that. But knowing that didn't make her absence any easier. At night, when he lay in bed, he found himself thinking about her, about the way she had laughed when she finally caught a fish, about the way her hand had fit so easily in his. He told himself it didn't matter, that she had been a passing summer memory, nothing more. But deep down, he knew that was a lie. And then, just as he was trying to push it all aside, life hit him with something much worse. It started with a phone call. Jack was finishing up his shift when his younger sister, Emma, called from home. "Jack," she said, her voice trembling. "It's Mom." His stomach dropped. "What happened?" She collapsed. Emma whispered. "They're taking her to the hospital now." Jack didn't even respond. He grabbed his keys and ran. By the time he arrived at the small hospital in town, his mother was already in a hospital bed, her face pale, her breathing shallow. The doctor's words were like a hammer to his chest. "She has a heart condition," he explained. "It's been developing for some time, but she's been ignoring the symptoms." Jack clenched his jaw. That sounded exactly like his mother, always putting others before herself, even at the cost of her own health. "She'll need ongoing treatment," the doctor continued. "Medication, checkups, possibly surgery down the line." Jack didn't even need to ask about the cost. He already knew the answer. Too much. So he did what he always did, he worked harder. He picked up more shifts at the dock, took on handyman jobs around town, anything to bring in extra cash. He barely slept, running himself into exhaustion just to keep up with the mounting bills. But it still wasn't enough. And then, the next blow came. One afternoon, while finishing up at the boat rental, his boss, Carl, called him into the office. "Jack," Carl sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I hate to do this, but we're making some changes around here." Jack tensed. "What kind of changes?" Carl hesitated. "New management. They're bringing in their own staff." Jack's stomach sank. "You're firing me?" Carl looked genuinely regretful. "It's not personal, kid. You're one of the best workers I've had, but it's out of my hands." Jack stood there, gripping the edge of the desk so hard his knuckles turned white. "Listen," Carl continued, lowering his voice. "If I could keep you, I would. But between you and me, this town's changing. More tourists, more development, they want polished staff. People who fit the new image." Jack scoffed. He knew what that meant. Richer, more refined. Not him. Without another word, he walked out. He spent the next few weeks doing whatever he could to make money, fixing fences, repairing roofs, hauling furniture. Anything, But even with all his effort, the bills kept stacking up. Then, one evening, he came home to find his sister sitting at the kitchen table, an envelope in her hands, her face pale. "Jack," she whispered, sliding the paper toward him. He picked it up. Final notice. Foreclosure warning. Jack's heart pounded. They were going to lose the house. Everything his mother had worked for. Everything their family had left. Jack closed his eyes, his fists clenching. He had always believed that if he worked hard enough, he could keep his family afloat. That no matter how bad things got, he would find a way. But now, for the first time in his life, Jack Carter didn't know how to fix this. The late afternoon sun cast a warm glow over the small, worn-down house that Jack called home. The front porch paint was peeling, the wooden steps creaked under the weight of time, and the once lush garden his mother loved had wilted under the weight of their struggles. Jack sat on the porch, his elbows resting on his knees, staring at the foreclosure notice crumpled in his hands. His chest felt heavy, his mind racing through every possible solution, none of which seemed good enough. Then, the sound of an approaching engine broke through the silence. He looked up just in time to see a sleek black car pull up in front of the house. The kind of car that didn't belong in a place like this. Jack frowned, standing as the driver stepped out and opened the back door. And then, she stepped out. Olivia. For a moment, Jack just stood there, unable to process what he was seeing. She looked different from the girl he had spent those summer days with. Gone were the carefree shorts and tank tops, the wind-blown hair and sand-dusted skin. Instead, she wore a fitted blazer over a simple silk blouse, her hair smooth, her posture straight. She looked powerful. But then she met his gaze. And he saw it, the same Olivia, the one who had laughed on his boat, who had clutched his hand on the beach, who had stared at him like he was the first real thing in her world. She took a deep breath, stepping closer. Jack. Jack. His name on her lips sent something sharp through his chest. He cleared his throat. Olivia. A flicker of relief crossed her face, like she had worried he wouldn't say her name at all. Jack crossed his arms, nodding toward the car. Did you get lost or something? A small smile tugged at her lips, but it faded as her gaze swept over the house behind him. I came to see you. Jack exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Olivia, why? I know, Jack, she interrupted, her voice soft but firm. About your mom. About the house. About everything. His jaw tensed. Who told you? I looked into it, she admitted. After I left, I couldn't stop thinking about you. So I asked someone to find out how you were doing. Jack let out a humorless laugh. So what, you felt bad for me? Her eyes flashed. No. She exhaled sharply, trying to find the right words. I came because I care. Jack swallowed hard, looking away. Well, thanks, but I don't need a pity visit. That's not what this is, she said firmly. He turned back to her. Then what is it? She hesitated for just a second before stepping even closer. It's a chance. Jack frowned. A chance for what? Olivia straightened her shoulders. To change your life. Jack narrowed his eyes. Olivia. I know you, she cut in. You'd rather drown than accept money from me, so I won't offer. Jack clenched his jaw but didn't argue. Instead, she reached into her bag, pulling out a folder. What I am offering is a job. Jack blinked. What? She handed him the folder. I'm working on a project in California, a foundation that builds homes for families in need. It's something I've been pushing for a long time, and now I have the resources to do it. Jack slowly flipped open the folder, scanning the documents inside. I need people who know how to build, Olivia continued. People who work hard, who understand what it means to need something and fight for it. Jack looked up, confused. Why me? She held his gaze. Because you're the hardest working person I've ever met. Because I know you won't take a handout, but you'll take an opportunity. Jack swallowed, glancing back down at the paperwork. It was real. A real job. A way out. A way to save his family. He looked back at Olivia, trying to ignore the way his heart pounded. You came all this way just to offer me a job. She nodded. I told you. I couldn't stop thinking about you. Jack exhaled slowly, staring at the papers in his hands. He had spent so long believing that his life would never change, that he would always be stuck, fighting a losing battle. But here she was, offering him something he had never been given before. A chance. He looked back at her, searching her face for any hint of hesitation. But there was none. Olivia Parker had come back for him. And this time Jack wasn't going to let her go. The California sun burned high in the sky, casting long shadows over the construction site. The air smelled of fresh-cut wood and concrete, mixing with the distant scent of the ocean breeze rolling in from the west. Jack wiped the sweat from his brow and adjusted his grip on the hammer, driving another nail into place. It had been months since he arrived in Los Angeles, stepping into a world so vastly different from his own. Skyscrapers, high-end restaurants, people rushing around in tailored suits. None of it had felt real at first. But this felt real. The sound of saws buzzing, the rhythmic pounding of hammers, the teamwork of men and women working side by side to build homes for those who had none. It was hard, honest work. And for the first time in a long time, Jack felt like he was building something, not just for others but for himself. At first he had been an outsider. Some of the other workers didn't know what to make of him, the guy from nowhere, the one Olivia Parker had personally brought onto the project. Some assumed he wouldn't last, that he was just another charity case. But Jack worked harder than anyone. He arrived first and left last. He learned quickly, picked up new skills, took on the toughest jobs without complaint. When something went wrong, he fixed it. When the team needed leadership, he stepped up. And people noticed, including him. William Parker, Olivia's father. At first, Mr. Parker had been skeptical. He had seen Jack as nothing more than a temporary distraction, a summer fling Olivia had brought home out of rebellion. But as the weeks passed, he saw the way Jack carried himself, the way he worked, the way people respected him. And one evening, after watching Jack oversee an entire build site on his own, William Parker approached him with something Jack had never expected: a handshake. "You've got potential, son," Mr. Parker admitted. "More than I gave you credit for." It wasn't a declaration of approval, but it was something. And for Jack, that was enough. That night, the waves crashed gently against the shore, the moon casting silver streaks across the sand. Jack and Olivia walked side by side along the beach in Malibu, their footprints trailing behind them. "You're quiet tonight," Olivia said, nudging him playfully. Jack exhaled, looking out at the water. "Just thinking." "About what?" "What?" He smirked. "How I never thought I'd end up here." She chuckled. "Well, I never thought I'd fall in love with the guy who saved my life." Jack stopped walking. Olivia took a few steps before realizing he had halted. She turned, a question forming on her lips. But then she saw it. Jack, dropping to one knee in the sand. Her breath caught. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small object, delicate, handcrafted, gleaming under the moonlight. A ring. Not a diamond, not gold, but a seashell. A tiny, perfect shell he had picked up from the Outer Banks the day before he left, carefully shaped and polished into a band. A piece of home. A piece of them. Jack looked up at her, his blue eyes steady, unwavering. "Olivia Parker," he said, his voice quiet but sure. "I don't have a mansion or a fancy last name. I don't have a private jet or a billion-dollar empire. But I have this." He held up the ring. "And I have you." Olivia's hands trembled as they covered her mouth. Jack swallowed hard, his heart pounding. "I love you," he continued. "I've loved you since that summer, since the first time you called me sailor and nearly fell off my boat." A watery laugh escaped her. "I don't know where this life will take us," he admitted, "but if I get to spend it with you, I know it'll be worth it." He took a breath, then asked the only question that had ever really mattered. "Will you marry me?" A single tear slipped down Olivia's cheek as she nodded, her voice breaking. "Yes." Jack let out a breath of relief, a grin breaking across his face as he slid the simple shell ring onto her finger. Then, before he could stand, Olivia threw herself into his arms, knocking them both into the sand, her lips crashing against his. And in that moment, with the ocean roaring behind them and the stars stretching endlessly above, Jack knew. He had finally found where he belonged. The waves lapped gently at the shore, their rhythmic crash blending with the soft hum of laughter and music. The golden hues of the setting sun bathed the beach in warmth, casting long shadows over the white chairs arranged in a neat semicircle on the sand. Fairy lights twinkled between wooden posts, swaying slightly in the ocean breeze. Jack stood barefoot in the sand, his hands loosely clasped in front of him, the salty wind tussling his dark hair. He had never imagined himself standing here, not like this, not in a tailored linen shirt, surrounded by friends and family, waiting for the love of his life to walk toward him. Then she appeared. Olivia. She moved toward him with effortless grace, her white dress flowing around her like the waves themselves. Her hair was loose, catching the breeze, her bare feet sinking slightly into the warm sand with each step. She wasn't adorned in diamonds or pearls, no extravagant jewelry, no designer gown, just her, simple and breathtakingly beautiful. Jack could barely breathe. Their guests faded into the background. The only thing that mattered was the look in her eyes, the way her smile softened as she reached him. The ceremony was intimate, heartfelt. Jack's sister, Emma, stood beside him as his best woman, while Olivia's closest childhood friend held her bouquet. Even William Parker, Olivia's father, sat among the guests, watching his daughter with quiet acceptance, a man who had once doubted Jack but now saw the truth in his love for her. When the officiant finally spoke the words, "You may kiss the bride," Jack didn't hesitate. He pulled Olivia into his arms, kissing her deeply as the crowd erupted in cheers. She was his, and he was hers, forever. The months that followed were a whirlwind of change. Jack continued working for Olivia's foundation, but now he had a bigger vision. With her support, he expanded the project beyond California, bringing it to Virginia, the place that had shaped him. He returned to Outer Banks, using his experience to build homes for struggling families, ensuring that no one else would have to face the hardships he had endured. Olivia, in turn, left behind the world she had once known. The extravagant galas, the mindless luxury, the pressure of being a billionaire's daughter, it no longer held meaning for her. Instead, she found joy in the simple moments, painting walls of a newly built home, handing over house keys to families who had never owned a place of their own, seeing the gratitude in their eyes. She and Jack traveled together, working side by side, changing lives one home at a time. And yet, no matter how far they went, they always found their way back, to the beach where it all began. One evening, long after the world had quieted, Jack and Olivia sat on the sand, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Olivia leaned her head against Jack's shoulder, letting out a content sigh. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked softly. Jack glanced down at her, brushing a stray curl from her face. "Which one?" "The day you pulled me out of the ocean." Jack smirked. "You mean the day you nearly drowned because you thought you could handle a rip current?" She playfully smacked his arm. "I didn't know." He chuckled, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Yeah, I think about it all the time." Olivia smiled, her fingers tracing idle patterns in the sand. "It's funny," she mused. "I thought you were just some stranger saving my life that day. I didn't realize you'd be the one giving me a whole new one." Jack's chest tightened at her words. He pulled her closer, resting his chin atop her head. "I think we saved each other," he murmured. She looked up at him, eyes shining in the last light of day. "Yeah," she whispered. "I think so too." And as they sat there, the waves whispering their timeless lullaby, Jack knew. They had found something far greater than wealth, far greater than fate itself. They had found love, and they had found home. And so Jack and Olivia's story became more than just a tale of love. It became a testament to fate, resilience, and the power of kindness. What started as an unexpected rescue in the ocean turned into something neither of them had imagined. They came from different worlds, yet they built a life together, not on wealth or status, but on love, purpose, and the simple beauty of helping others. Jack once believed he was destined to struggle, and Olivia once thought she was trapped by the weight of her last name. But together they proved that true happiness isn't found in where you come from. It's found in who you choose to be and who you choose to love. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more emotional and inspiring tales that remind us of life's most beautiful truths. Because sometimes the most incredible stories are the ones that find us when we least expect them.